So that's why it's nice to go to our next speaker, Atyab, who is the Deputy Secretary General of the Kuwait Kuwait Center for Society for Human Rights. And Atyab has been very involved in both research around migrant workers and what's happening to migrant workers in Kuwait, very much involved hands-on as a lawyer in dealing with cases of migrant workers, as well as very involved in preparing, and I think this was with the IOM itself as well, these kind of handbooks in many different languages on what migrants need to know. And she's flashing it there, that little packet that they bring in every seminar that we go to, which are of several languages of information that migrant workers in Kuwait need to have. And again, the society prepared these booklets. The question is, why did the society have to prepare these booklets? Were migrants coming not informed? Was there something wrong in this chain of information that you all had to go to produce so many booklets of your own? And what was the process and the need for it? Atyab, over to you. Atyab, you have to unmute your mic. Did we?
Okay, thank you. So first of all, I'd like to thank everyone who attended this webinar. I'd like to thank William too, thank Rolla and everyone here. Information from a perspective that combined both human rights work and legal work. I have noticed for the past, let's say, 5 years working in the migrant workers field or in migrant workers' rights, migrant workers come to Kuwait facing the language barrier. It is devastating and exhausting, not only on the basis of work, but mainly on the basis of knowing your rights, knowing when to demand something, when to say that you can stop something, when to understand whether if it's a violation to your right or not. And I think information exchange is very essential to the whole working process in Kuwait, whether if it's for migrants or citizens, and providing a very accurate information was a challenge. Because when you come to courts, let's say I'm an attorney and I practice my work at courts, I rarely find translators, migrant workers who are coming to claim their rights before the judge, right, to judiciary. Even if it is stated there that there will be translators, we rarely find them. And this is the barrier that stands between an individual or migrant workers and the ability to know their rights. And we try to overcome this barrier through more than one project. Actually, we've been doing a project called Together. First of all, I'd like to talk a bit about the Kuwait Society for Human Rights. And of course, thank William and Rolla too for always including us in this very, very active, let's say, coalition and cooperation. We've been there with the MFA in Dubai. We've been there in Istanbul. Kuwait Society for Human Rights really appreciate the hard work that William does to advocate for migrant workers. So the Kuwait Society for Human Rights, it was established back in 1988 as a branch of the Arab Organizations for Human Rights. We're a non-government organization dedicated to the protection and promotion of human rights in Kuwait and the Arab world, accordance with the international standards established by the United Nations consensus and in the international conventions. Of course, I have my colleague, Mr. Saleh Al-Hassan, is the one that I really stand out for him, because he is the one who dedicated, let's say, 80% of the Kuwait Society for Human Rights efforts for migrant workers. He was the spark that started the project Together. And the project Together has gone through more than one phase. Phase 1, which was in cooperation with the Embassy of the Kingdom of the Netherlands in Kuwait. The project aimed to participate in enlightening migrant workers in Kuwait regarding their rights as stated in the national laws and, of course, the international conventions like ILO conventions and migrant worker conventions. The project had goals. One of them, and the most important, was to translate the labor law in Kuwait in more than one languages, in more than one language. So the this tiny bag that I was flashing at the beginning contained these booklets that we have worked on. And this actually was the first copy of the booklet. It's way developed, way improved now. This had only 5 languages. Now we are covering 7. So we are very proud to say, and the first one was for the labor law. At that time, when the project on its first phase, Kuwait didn't issue the domestic workers law yet. So we had these including only the labor law. And of course, we had them in Urdu. We had them in this language. Of course, English, everybody speaks it. Some Arabic. We had even comics. We wanted to facilitate the information for every migrant to help them become their own lawyers, because when somebody knows an info, it's going to be a lot easier for them. Even the comics, we translated them in a lot of languages. And I would like to share with you the aims to the project. Okay, so we had these comics to facilitate. We don't have it in Nepali. I think there are 7 languages now, and I think Nepali is one of them, because in the third phase, which is I'm going to be explaining next to you, we included the French language, because the French language is the most language used by African workers in Kuwait. See, the African workers, sir, as we have seen by field experience, most of them facing violations, and they don't have embassies in Kuwait like Ivory Coast, like Benin. So we have to translate like even more than 7. We're planning to add more than 7 languages. So in the project Together Phase 1, we translated the labor law into several languages. We had this comic books to facilitate the information for migrant workers. We spread all the information through social media platforms. We had websites. We had even an application on the mobile in which you can just download for free and get the information within your language. So these booklets, when they were just in 5 languages, we published over than 10,000 copies, which is success. Very good number. Okay, we had a public awareness campaign through social media, social media platforms. We had daily posters in different languages to explain laws for them. Of course, one of the most important activities that were there in the project was the hotline, because through did you get the yes, actually we will be translating this book in Malayalam thanks to the big support of William and the colleagues in the MFA. One of them, his name is Francis. He volunteered to translate it for us in other Indian languages. So back to the main important activity in the project, which was the hotline. In the hotline, we had lawyers answering legal questions. We provided legal consultations and all kind of helps and guides and info to provide people who would call. And we got a lot of calls. The last time I checked on the hotline, we got over 4,000 calls, which is a really good number. It means we are reaching out people. Okay. Hi, Patricia. It's good to. I think I should stick to what I'm talking and not answer now. Yeah. So the people who got from the booklets are over 15,000. People who got into our website and the application were 37,025. people who called in the hotline in the first phase of Together were 2,455. So the number 4,000 is in the next project that I'm going to speak to you about. So the next phase of the project was Together 2 in cooperation with the SDC, the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation. In the next phase, we included legal representation. See, when you talk about legal representation, you know how it is really expensive for migrant workers to provide attorney fees, and you do not find pro bono lawyers a lot these days, especially in Kuwait. So what happened is in phase 2, in cooperation with the SDZ, the Kuwait Society for Human Rights was able to cover over 300 lawsuits for migrant workers who didn't have to pay anything. We covered that with the SDC. There was an observatory that was issued. Uh, its main project is to monitor and supervise and let's say monitor all information regarding cases, regarding issues, conflicts, difficulties, challenges, all the things that really touches migrant workers' life and really makes it difficult. What are the challenges they face? This is what the role of the observatory. Of course, we had another guides that we issued similar to these booklets. And regarding the one who asked me in the questions regarding the first phase of the project Together, the 5 languages were Arabic, English, Urdu, Filipino, and Hindi. But of course now we added more languages. Okay, of course, in the second phase of Together, there was a study that really enlightens and talk about and share information, very accurate information regarding the implementation of the domestic workers law in Kuwait, which is kind of new. So Kuwait issued the domestic workers law. It's a step closer to humanity, but still from a very legal perspective. As we studied the law, we found a lot of shortfalls and gaps. We thought that we have to point out, and we did in that study. There was surveys, there was I would love to share that study with anyone who would ask, because there was actually surveys been distributed for domestic workers to know whether they know about the law or not, if their rights are granted or not. And we had this result stating that a lot of domestic workers do not know about their rights. This kind of information is really essential to people who advocate for migrant workers' rights, because they have to know what's really happening, especially for domestic workers who face the lack of freedom of movement. There was legal consultations on the hotline, of course. In the second phase, this is nice, this is a nice number, we had provided more than 5,000 legal consultations for people who called. We had, of course, legal representation, as I told you, and we explained more of the law. We had more consultations, more people speaking, and I would like to thank Mr. Alan Jones. He's a very well educated, very good man who helped us with the second phase of the project Together. Now in the third phase, we have expanded our work. Expanding means adopting more legal representation, adopting more awareness campaigns. We have added more than now 700 cases to be held by attorneys who have a human rights work and willing to advocate for migrant workers before the courts, of course, and more booklets. We are going to improve the platform. So the platform right now in project 2 had 7 languages. Anyone who's in Kuwait would install this application, which is also a platform online, and would choose their language, submit their complaint, their question, what they want to know about the law. And then myself as a legal expert and Mr. Saleh, the spark in the KSHR, would answer their questions. Also, Mr. Francis, who's very active at MFA, volunteered to help us at the platform because he knows a lot of languages. This is what I really wanted to point out regarding information exchange. And thanks to information, we wouldn't reach these great numbers. We are hoping we could reach more numbers in the future. Thank you for your time. Uh,
Thank,
thank
thank
you
you.
all. Yeah.
Thank you, Atyab. Thank you very much for that. I like the numbers that you have given. 10,000 copies of your publications. I want to know how many are still in the office. One is because I know also how NGOs we do publications and then it remains in the office. But I really think there is a lot of stuff in what you have said with regard to the number of hotline calls, 4,000. The number of cases that have been taken up, 7,000. The number of legal consultations that you have
Sorry,
conducted.
Mr. William, for interrupting, but the lawsuits are not 7,700 and above.
700, 700 and above, 5,000 legal consultations. That is big. That is big. That means workers are coming to you, asking you for information, seeking you out for information. And I think that is what I'm trying to get at is how do we create that, where relevant information, relevant stakeholders are engaged in this process, which is a constant dynamic process. Because I know the booklet system, I know that system, and I know that sometimes that system is not reaching as far as it should reach. It's a necessary tool. We do it, people do it, organizations do it, but is it having as much effect as, let us say, the hotline or directly talking to migrant workers, engaging migrant workers? You didn't touch upon something that I was hoping you would touch upon. I'll give you time to come back to it in the second round. Is that there is also a lot of information today in mainstream media in Kuwait with regard to migrant workers, and that is not very pleasant. There's a lot of xenophobic language, a lot of xenophobia, a lot of hate speech, and things like that in relation to migrants. How is media involved in d- this kind of information and putting out this information? And how do you get involved then in counteracting or countering this information? I saw a very good statement recently by the Kuwait Society. I'm happy you all put that statement out. I think it was last week or something like that. I like that statement, but I'll ask you to speak on that when you come around.